Thingkho Le Malcha, by KSO Media and Documentation Cell, issue number 66, Thursday, 16 November 2023. Headlines: Kuki INPI Tingnupal condemns attack on AR in Sable area. COTU's enforced indefinite eco-blockade over government's apathy. UK left clarifies on news report, proscribed PLA claims hands in attack. Indian Aadhaar card, flag belonging to Mayday militants among items seized by PDF and TMU. For Kuki Zio tribal's abduction case, FIR lodged against Iran by Thingkho. Mizoram, 29 Myanmar army soldiers surrender after intense border clash. Manipur, a blueprint with immediate and long-term measures to contain violence. Thingkho Le Malcha, Relief Center update. Don Bosco High School Relief Center. Thingkho Le Malcha, managed by Young Mizo Association, Waimate Chinkan branch. Total inmates registered, 53. Male, 30. Female, 23. Kuki victims update AS on November 10, 2023. Deaths, 150. Villages burnt, 200 plus. Houses burnt, 7,000 plus. Churches and synagogues burnt, 360. Displaced persons, 41,425. Kuki INPI Tingnupal condemns attack on AR in Sable area. The Kuki INPI Tingnupal KIT district vehemently condemned the attack on 20 Assam rifles by suspected valley-based insurgency groups, BIGs, in Kukso areas in Manipur's Tingnupal district. The suspected band Mayday militants ambushed a troop of 20 Assam rifles by planting and exploding two powerful improvised explosive devices, IEDs, in Saibol area of Tingnupal district on Thursday morning. The militants also opened fire on the Assam rifles, following which the AR retaliated. Fortunately, none of the AR personnel were injured in the incident. The incident came 3 days after the Ministry of Home Affairs, MHA, declared several Mayday extremist groups, based in Myanmar, as outlawed organizations under UPA.I in its press condemnation on Thursday. The Kuki top body of the district mentioned that an Indian Aadhaar card of one Moarangathe Pramananda was among the items seized by anti-junta democratic forces when they captured the camps of the combined forces of junta army and Mayday extremists in TMU district, Myanmar. Taking advantage of the porous border, these Mayday terrorist groups had been carrying out their terror activities on Assam rifles and Kukizo civilians, it alleged. While the attack was suspected to be the handiwork of the Mayday militants, several Impul-based Mayday media houses had implicated in Sioux Group, UKLF over the incident. However, the People's Liberation Army, PLA, one of the banned Mayday secessionist group, has claimed responsibility on its social media post. The Kuki body said that the Myanmar-based Mayday terror groups, who have been declared as outlawed by MHA, should stop such activities in Kukizo areas. If they have the guts to challenge the Indian government, let them do so in their valley areas, it said. Alleging that several Mayday media houses which often implicated the Kukizo community in such incidents were nothing but a media house without media ethics and a mouthpiece of terrorist groups. The Kuki NP also stated that attacking the Indian security forces in Kukizo areas and then blaming and implicating the Kuki insurgent groups under suspension of operation clearly showed the intention of the Mayday terrorists and Mayday media to create a rift between Assam rifles and Kukizo community and to derail the Sioux agreement, stressing that such attacks on central security forces performing their duty must be put down with a firm hand. The Kuki NP Tingnupal district called upon all authorities concerned to work in a close concerted effort to bring the assailants of the attack to justice. Ban Mayday militants ambush Assam Rifles patrol. 3 days after the Ministry of Home Affairs extended ban on 9 Mayday militant outfits, the People's Liberation Army, PLA, one of the banned outfits, carried out ambush in Manipur's Tingnupal district on Thursday. The Assam Rifles patrol was targeted in an attempted improvised explosive device, IED. However, none of the personnel, around 10, in the targeted vehicle were injured in the blast, officials said. The incident took place at around 8:15 a.m. in the general area of Saibol in Tingnupal district, an area with a mixed population of different communities. An Assam Rifles official stated that the attack had been carried out by unidentified insurgents. A patrol of the 20 Assam Rifles Battalion from the company operating base in Saibol was out on a routine area domination patrol that had begun early Thursday morning when the incident took place, at around 8 to 8:15 a.m. A group of unidentified insurgents attempted to attack the patrol while it was moving in a mine-protected vehicle, and there was an IED blast. There were also bursts of firing. The Assam Rifles personnel retaliated immediately, said the official. KOTU's enforced indefinite eco-blockade over government's apathy. The Committee on Tribal Unity Sadar Hills Kangpokpi's indefinite economic blockade kicked off in Manipur this midnight with strict checking of vehicular movement carrying essential commodities. Vehemently condemning the alleged indifferent attitude of the concerned authority in dispensing law and order in Kuki's inhabited areas, KOTU had decided to impose an indefinite economic blockade along National Highway 2 and 37. Volunteers were seen monitoring and checking the movement of vehicles along the highway carrying essential items toward the state capital Impol. KOTU instructed its volunteers to strictly enforce the economic blockade at various locations on both the highways. The KOTU had stated that it has been agitating for a meaningful resolution on different aspects, but their demands have been consistently ignored. It also stated that the unconditional release of the two innocent Kukizo is indispensable on grounds of illegal detention and impartial execution of law and order in a democratic setup. The apparent status of the state indicates the total failure of the constitutional machinery propagated by fascist and lunatic powermongers of the state, it stated. It further stated that the committee stands resolute in its endeavor for justice, and any form of systematic subjugation will be dealt with firmly by the Kukizo people. The committee also prepared a roster for duty to monitor the movement of essential vehicles along the highway. During the day, Kukizo womenfolk from Lungphao and KYU executives are seen strictly enforcing the economic blockade at Kangpokpi district headquarters, while hundreds of womenfolk are enforcing the same at Gamjafai. It is also reported that a good number of vehicles ferrying essential commodities are stranded along the National Highway 2 in the Senapati area. KOTU's indefinite economic blockade has also been strictly enforced for the whole night by womenfolks and youths on a roster basis from various localities and adjoining villages of Kangpokpi town. UK left clarifies on news report, proscribed PLA claims hands in attack. In connection with the news reportage by One Kongthang news channel, the United Kuki Liberation Front, UK left, on Thursday clarified that none of their cadres were involved in the attack on the Central Security Forces at Sable Naram village today at around 8:30 a.m., stating that the UK left honors and respects the Sioux agreements signed with the government. The UFIT claimed that it did not have presence in the said area and warned Kongthang News Network to conduct thorough verification on any news item before publishing it to the public domain. The outfit also warned that it would not remain a silent spectator if such defamation of the organization is repeated in future. Meanwhile, an outlawed Mayday terror group, People's Liberation Army, has claimed responsibility to the attack of the Assam Rifles patrolling on Thursday. On its official social media platform, Ningtan Pagel, as well as in its official website, the PLA has announced its role to the attack of the Central Forces. In its website, the PLA states, Atimba Pao, Ngasi Iag Pung 8 Muk Taram Data PLA Gi Yale Gi Thoudang Chatlaba Kongbu Amaga Loilam Sandakpa Mayung Lami AR. Ga More Dajai KM 20 Muk Lapna Leba Tingnupal District Ki Nurum Amasung Saibol Kan Anaji Marakta Akamba Mawandanome, Bom Kaya Yauna Kapnikar. Makapound Gaimanasi, which roughly translates as short news. Today, at around 8 a.m. in the morning, a group of PLA cadres while on their revolutionary mission counter with enemy from mainland India, AR, between Nurum and Saibol villages. Located at about 20 kilometers from More and Tingnupal district. There were heavy exchange of gunshots and bombing. More details awaited. Ningtan Payajul is maintained by the People's Liberation Army, Manipur. The PLA, founded in 1978, is the armed wing of the Revolutionary People's Front. The RPF upholds protracted guerrilla war to evolve into a full-fledged people's armed struggle for national liberation and social emancipation of Manipur from the clutches of India's colonial rule. The website also stated that India's colonial rule involves a complex process of unjust political subjugation, military oppression, economic underdevelopment, social crises, communal divides, racist demographic invasion, cultural onslaughts, reactionary regimes, proxy wars, narco-terrorism, moral and physical degradation, environmental destructions, ideological and intellectual perversion, social inequality, and dependency syndromes in Manipur. The site shares information about the armed revolutionary war waged by our party and fraternal parties. It also exposes information about the diabolic policies, reactionary programs, counter-revolutionary tactics, and terror and crimes of India's colonial rule. Indian Aadhaar Card, flag belonging to Mayday militants among items seized by PDF and TMU. Indian Aadhaar Card of one Morang Tham Premananda and flag belonging to a Manipur extremist group, probably of pre-PK, was among the items seized by the PDF and TMU district, Myanmar on Thursday. The Democratic Forces in TMU had uploaded many pictures and video clips of the incidents and the seized items on their Facebook page. Violence escalates inside Myanmar territory and more. TMU border since the last few days as the Democratic Forces DA in TMU Township/District have captured several camps belonging to Myanmar Army. The Democratic Alliance Army DA had raided and overrun the junta camps in Kampat, Myanmar, Wadak and Panda along the Asian Highway in TMU District, Myanmar. Besides capturing the camps, the pro-democracy forces had also seized huge quantities of arms and ammunitions. Report about Myanmar junta army and Mayday militants escaping to Chundel District, India, after the PDF and allied forces overran their camps had surfaced in November 8, 2023. Notably, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India had declared several Meitei extremists as outlawed. These Mayday extremists were taking shelter in Myanmar territory. A large chunk of the southern part of TMU district had been captured by democratic forces as PDF and allied forces seized the camps of Myanmar Army and its militia groups in Kampat, BP 58, Bukan/Zuman, Wadak, Myanmar and Panda, BP 72/73. The PDF are now less than 10 kilometers away from TMU proper town. For Kuki Zio tribal's abduction case, FIR lodged against Harambai Tingle. The police have filed a first information report against people suspected to be members of radical Meitei groups Harambai Tingle and Meitei Lipun, among others, for allegedly abducting Kukizos. A 0 FR was lodged on a complaint by a family member of one of the abducted Kukizos. The 0 FIR was first lodged in Churachandpur police station and was forwarded to OC Lamsang PS. In a complaint lodged on November 14, the complainant said that the Harambai Tingle, led by a person identified as Korang Gambakuman, and supported by some insurgent groups in the Impol Valley have been terrorizing Kuki tribal inhabitants of the hill districts. On November 7, 5 Kukizo people, including 2 women, were allegedly forcibly taken away by a Meitei mob near Kangchup Chinkhong village checkpost in the presence of the police and central security forces. They were traveling towards El Phaijiang village for a wedding function. Accusing Harambai Tingle, Mayday Lipun, a community of Meitei women called Mirapaibis and valley-based insurgent groups of voluntarily causing grievous harm and also of possessing unauthorized firearms. The complainant urged the authorities to invoke appropriate sections of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Mizoram, 29 Myanmar Army soldiers surrender after intense border clash. In a significant development on the tumultuous Myanmar-Mizoram border, 29 Myanmar Army soldiers surrendered on November 16 following a fierce 4-hour gun battle with the People's Army CNDF in the Tuabual area, just 13 kilometers from the Mizoram border. The clash, which occurred on November 15, resulted in 2 Myanmar soldiers losing their lives, with 3 others sustaining minor injuries from the CNDF forces. After intense negotiations between leaders of the CNDF and the Myanmar military, an agreement was reached, compelling the Myanmar soldiers to surrender. Originally slated for surrender in Sai Kumphai, Mizoram on November 15, the process was delayed due to navigational difficulties. The 29 troops from Myanmar finally arrived in Sai Kumphai at 2:15 p.m. on November 16, laying down their arms in compliance with the agreement. They surrendered to the Mizoram police, presenting guns, ammunition, and bombs. Mizoram police, along with the Vafai Village Council, VC, and Vafai Branch Young Mizo Association, YMA, extended a warm welcome to the Myanmar troops. Subsequently, the surrendered soldiers were handed over to the Assam Rifles for further processing. Manipur, a blueprint with immediate and long-term measures to contain violence. The recent statement by the Chief Minister of Manipur that the violence in the state is 90% under control is shocking given the fact that almost 6 months of ethnic violence there remains unabated and keeps flaring up sporadically. The situation is far worse than even what prevailed during the partition. Even at the height of ethnic cleansing during that time, there still remained and continue to exist several pockets where minority communities continued to live peacefully within the majority-dominated areas. Malerkotla and Punjab and notwithstanding the recent aberration caused by some troublemakers from outside, and Haryana are such examples of peace and harmony. Similar islands of Hindu minorities exist in Sindh province in Pakistan and many areas in Bangladesh. The situation is entirely different in Manipur. The ethnic divide between the Kuki and Meitei people in Manipur is complete. Being at the receiving end of violence, there are no more Kukis left in the valley dominated by Meiteis, and similarly no Meiteis remain in hill areas dominated by Kukis. In fact, the establishment has been compelled to separate Kuki and Meitei communities from each other by way of creating buffer zones and deploying security forces along these buffer zones to regulate entry and exit, in a manner similar to what happens on an international border. thousands of automatic weapons, including rocket launchers and lots of ammunition, have been looted from Police and India Reserve Battalion (IRB) armories. These are being used by perpetrators of violence with impunity in targeting civilians. The state government has been reduced to meekly requesting the looters to return these weapons and ammunition without any result. Over 200 lives have been lost and more than 75,000 persons have been internally displaced. However, the lack of action on the part of both the union and state governments, ruled by the BJP, is inexplicable. This inaction has angered the public against both the state and union governments. The state unit of BJP is reported to have stated this in unequivocal terms in a letter written to the center. Public anger and protests are slowly turning the tide, placing the responsibility of this prolonged disturbance squarely on the government's failure to address the situation. The chief minister, who is a Meitei himself, appears to be fast losing support within his own community, with his house and the house of the state BJP chief being attacked by Meitei people. It is a sad reflection on the incompetence of institutions of state if a large part of the population has no faith in state police and are compelled to raise and depend on village defense committees to ensure their own safety and security from people of other community. The incompetence of the Manipur police has been proved beyond doubt by its abject surrender to mobs who looted their armories. People do not trust it to provide security to them. Not only the police, the bureaucracy as well as state government have proved themselves to be totally incompetent. People have lost confidence in the institutions of the state. The writ of the state doesn't appear to run any longer in Manipur, and it is fully and truly in the midst of a civil war. The situation, if not controlled, doesn't portend well for the peace and stability of the entire northeast India, large parts of which were in turmoil till a few years ago. In spite of the situation being so serious and its ramifications for the future of the northeast, the policy of the union government continues to remain in drift. It is surprising to note that the union government continues to repose faith in Biren Singh in spite of violence. The statement by the union home minister that chief minister has not been removed because he is cooperating is bewildering, because the decision about the imposition of the president's rule has to be based on the law and order situation in the state. It is irrefutable that the law and order situation in Manipur has broken irrevocably, and the imposition of the president's rule would have been a logical step to restore normalcy. The fact that Manipur police and Assam rifles deployed to control the violence are not trusted by one or the other parties in conflict makes the case for imposition of the president's rule even stronger. Decisions like leaving out 19 police stations located in the valley, dominated by the Meitei community, while extending FSBA to the rest of the state, or scrapping of suspension of operations. Agreement only with Kuki insurgent groups are astonishing and smack of partisan state leadership. The Meitei insurgent groups, however, not only continue to remain armed, they have, in fact, added to their inventory, with most of the arms looted from police having gone to them. The status of imposition of Article 355 remains shrouded in mystery, in spite of the fact that a retired IPS officer has been appointed to oversee the functioning of Manipur police purportedly under provisions of this article. However, no notification regarding the imposition of 355 is available in the public domain. In a reported response to an RTI query, MHA was not able to provide any clarity on this issue by stating that they do not have any information on the imposition of Article 355. The officer appointed for such oversight is supposed to report directly to the union government in order to obviate any interference by the state government. However, being an outsider, this officer probably does not have any control over the day-to-day functioning of Manipur police, which is deeply divided along ethnic lines. Police, the main agency responsible for controlling the situation, are acting in a partisan manner. The situation is so bad that police personnel belonging to one community cannot go to patrol the area where the other community is dominant. The peace committees set up in June have achieved no success, and violence continues. Early resolution of the conflict is extremely important to ensure that the secessionist insurgency in the northeast isn't revived. The burning of over 200 churches and almost 24 temples may also be exploited by communal elements by giving it a color of the Hindu-Christian conflict. In fact, the chief minister of Mizoram, in a recent interview to a prominent media group, has alluded to the communal nature of the problem. With inimical neighbors like China ever ready to fish in troubled waters, the integrity of the nation is at stake. The suspicion amongst communities is so deep-rooted that bringing normalcy will be a long-drawn affair. However, a start has to be made, and the first step in that direction must be to contain widespread violence. Priority, therefore, must be to restore peace at the earliest. Imposition of the president's rule in the early stages itself would have gone a long way in controlling the violence through the deployment of centrally controlled and impartial central armed forces, like CRPF, BSEF, ITBP, SSB, etc., besides the Indian Army. Imposition of the president's rule and deployment of these forces even at this stage will infuse confidence amongst people as these forces are unconcerned with local ethnic loyalties. This cannot be said of Manipur police, which is accused of openly siding with the Meitei community. On the other hand, Assam Rifles is accused of being partial towards Kukis by Meiteis. The imposition of the president's rule will also remove the Biren Singh ministry, which has lost legitimacy in the eyes of all communities, and create confidence amongst the population. It is important that the weapons looted by miscreants must return to the armories. The armed forces will have to conduct aggressive operations to recover these. This is possible only by delegating adequate powers to them through the imposition of a FSBA in the entire state, including 19 police stations in the Manipur Valley left out of its ambit so far. Delegation of such powers to Central Armed Forces will enable them to operate freely and conduct searches and combing operations to recover the looted weapons, besides enabling them to apprehend insurgents, extortionists, and criminals indulging in violence, and stop indiscriminate killings and help establish the rule of law. Special investigating teams and fast-track courts should also be considered to investigate and bring the culprits to trial at the earliest. Bringing perpetrators of violence and those who have committed heinous crimes, especially against women and children, to justice is the only way of bringing closure for the victims. The political leaders and bureaucrats must increase their visibility in the trouble-prone area and visit them frequently to assess the situation firsthand and redress grievances of people on the spot, wherever possible, in order to restore the confidence of the masses in the establishment. The peace committees need to act proactively and be innovative in their approach. People with impeccable integrity must be identified and incorporated into these committees. The community leaders, like village heads, known as Jay and Bud has in those areas, who are well respected by communities in the Northeast. And prominent women organizations must be roped in to initiate dialogue amongst communities and remove suspicion and schism between communities. The realization that the lives of different communities are inexorably interlinked and interdependent is the only way to contain the violence. Naga leaders, who have continued to remain neutral, can be gainfully utilized to bring about a rapprochement. Long-term measures. Priority must be given to ensure effective border management of India-Myanmar border to prevent illegal entrants from coming in and settling down in India, which is said to be one of the main reasons for the strife in the state. The deployment of a border guarding force close to the border will also ensure the effective implementation of the free movement regime and proper maintenance of records of local tribals coming in and going out. Deployment of border guarding force and the consequent necessity to create infrastructure for providing logistics to troops deployed close to the border on BOPs will add to employment and therefore prosperity of the border population. Deployment of a force exclusively for border guarding will also release the entire Assam Rifles for dedicated deployment to control internal security problems in Manipur and other states of the Northeast, which is the primary role of this elite force. The government must also ensure that remote areas of the state are provided with good administration and that the fruits of development reach the hill communities. One of the major grievances, and true to a large extent, of Kukis is that most of the development has taken place in the 10% valley area occupied by Meiteis. The remote hill areas must be developed and provided connectivity. My own experience in Chirachandpur and Manipur is that bureaucrats and police rarely if ever visit remote areas unless, of course, things have changed in the last 10 years since I was there. The remote hill areas are still in a time wrap with hardly any facilities and access to institutions and authorities to project their problems. As late as 2007, it took me over 6 hours to reach Bihang, a border town along the India-Myanmar border from Chirachandpur, a distance of only about 70 kilometers. My contacts informed me that there has been only a marginal improvement in the situation even after 15 years. As provided in Article 371C of the Constitution, the Committee of the Legislative Assembly of the state consisting of members of the Manipur Assembly elected from the hill areas of the state should be allowed to function effectively. Arrangements like autonomous district councils may also be considered in order to give more autonomy to hill districts. Necessary financial grants should be made available to these councils to enable them to carry out developmental work. The Act East policy of India, which is aimed to enhance connectivity, trade, and improve relations with our eastern neighbors, should be extended to include the development of northeastern states and improve connectivity, which is presently restricted only to main towns or capital cities of these states. Railway and road networks are said to be the greatest integrators of communities. India must focus on ensuring connectivity to the remotest parts while at the same time ensuring that the fragile ecology of the area is not disturbed. We must enhance investment to improve the Human Development Index. Focused investment in the education sector, environment-friendly industry, and agricultural activities in these states are essential. Investment in industry and infrastructure will lead to better avenues for employment and wean citizens away from indulging in violent criminal activities and drugs. The network of rail and roads in the remotest parts of these states is essential to integrate them with the mainstream. Allotting large tracts of land for something like palm cultivation, as widely reported in media, doesn't appear a viable option, as it will adversely affect the biodiversity of the area. Planting palm oil trees harms the quality of the soil, depleting large amounts of nutrients from the soil, thus degrading it. The resultant increase in use of herbicides, insecticides, and fertilizers contaminates water bodies and affects groundwater and the aquatic biodiversity. It is important to stop poppy cultivation in hill areas of Manipur through effective surveillance and deterrent action besides affirmative action by providing sustenance alternatives. People should be encouraged to take to poultry farming, dairy farming, and cattle rearing. The hill area, having terrain and weather conditions similar to other areas of the Northeast, should be suitable for coffee, pineapple, orange, banana, and medicinal plantations, or even rubber plantations. These cash crops will provide alternative means of income to hill people and thus decrease dependency on poppy cultivation. The question of the inclusion of Métis in Scheduled Tribe has to be deliberate, deeply after taking all factors into account. The authorities must consider recommendations made by various committees set up by the government from time to time in this regard. Assessment of 5 important criteria with regard to the Métis community, namely, primitive traits, distinct culture, geographical isolation, shyness of contact with the community at large, and backwardness, recommended by the Loker Committee in 1965, will provide useful insights in determining the issue. The recommendations of the Bourya Commission, 2002 to 2004, which focused on a wide range of issues from the 5th schedule to tribal land and forest, health and education, working of panchayats, and the status of tribal women to determine the scheduled tribe status, will also provide a benchmark to decide this vexed issue. Besides these, the recommendations made by the High-Level Committee, HLC, under the chairmanship of Professor Virginis Saxa in 2013 to study critical issues related to tribal communities, like livelihood, employment, education, health, involuntary displacement, and migration besides legal and constitutional matters, must also be studied. An important point to consider is that the grant of scheduled tribe status to Métis will deprive them of the benefit of SC and OBC reservations in government jobs. The model of reservations in government jobs adopted by Nagaland also should be studied. While all 16 Naga tribes are eligible for reservation as scheduled tribes for union government jobs, only 8 most backward Naga tribes are eligible for reservation in state government jobs. However, the demand of Métis for scheduled tribe status is mainly for the purpose of purchasing land in hill areas, not for reservation in government jobs. The most important reason for strife in Manipur is the land. The grouse of the Métis people is that they are confined to just about 11% of the land area of the state, and the valley being deprived of acquiring land in the hill areas because they do not have the status of scheduled tribes. The land in Manipur is regulated by 2 laws. First, the Manipur Land Revenue and Land Reforms Act, 1960, MLR and LR Act, 1960, and the other pertaining to the regulation of land in Manipur is the Manipur Conservation of Paddy Land and Wetland Act, 2014. Manipur Act No. 10 of 2014 aims to conserve the paddy land and wetland and to restrict the conversion or reclamation thereof in order to promote growth in the agricultural sector in Manipur. The Manipur Land Reform and Land Revenue Act, 1960, is extended to the whole valley along with a small portion of the hill area. The state government of Manipur has attempted on several occasions to make some amendments to MLR and LR, including efforts to introduce the new land use policy, 2014. Each such attempt has led to more conflict and polarization in the state, as these are considered to interfere with the tribal land ownership system based on traditional customary laws. These are considered attempts to marginalize the tribals and alienate them from ownership and possession of land. Tribal lands are privately owned by tribal individuals, and remaining lands belong to whole community of respective village. In case of Kuki tribe, the village chief is generally accepted as the owner of all lands of village. Section 158 of the MLR and LR Act provides special provisions regarding scheduled tribes. This section states that no transfer of land by a person who is a member of the scheduled tribe shall be valid unless b. Where the transfer is to a person who is not a member of any such tribe, it is made with the previous permission in writing of the Deputy Commissioner, provided that the Deputy Commissioner shall not give such permission unless he has first secured the consent thereto of the District Council within whose jurisdiction the land lies. However, since the MLR and LR Act is not applicable to hill areas, this legal protection is theoretically not available to hill areas, implying that non-tribals can buy land in tribal areas. Reportedly, there have been some such land transactions in the past. Under such circumstances, the authorities need to take a close look at the entire gamut of land laws and identify issues which need proper interpretation and implementation to the satisfaction of all ethnic communities. Continued turmoil in Manipur is a serious threat to the security and integrity of India. In the worst-case scenario, it has the potential to turn into a secessionist insurgency or a festering communal problem at best. Restoring normalcy at the earliest is most important. The situation, therefore, must be addressed with urgency, the first step towards which is to ensure that violence is contained while at the same time simultaneously preparing ground for addressing issues having long-term implications as discussed above. As the common saying goes, roof must be repaired when the sun is shining. It is still not too late, and the authorities must rise above the parochial consideration of ethnicity, religion, and region to resolve it. First published by The Wire. Sanjeev Krishan Sood retired as Additional Director General of the Border Security Force.